You tear down the house, then you put up the rent. You pocket the cash, and you crush all dissent.
Hello and welcome to the Red Diaper Pail, episode 38. This is a podcast about art, history, culture, technology, politics, and parenting from a left perspective. My name is Simone.
And I'm John Paul.
And we released the headlines earlier this week, episode 37. This is an artifact-only episode. We are doing a podcast. The Erza Klein show did a podcast on GLP-1.
Oh.
And his guest was Belluz, who is a health and science reporter, co-author of the book Food Intelligence. And they talk about everything GLP-1.
Okay.
I picked it because it seems like a big deal, the GLP-1.
Ezra Klein's Mr. Abundance. So this is part of the abundance agenda. Is everyone being on GLP-1?
He's actually very cynical about it. They hit on I think the high points or the right discussion points. They don't make very good points themselves, but it's a good jumping off podcast.
Cool.
All right, so here's the first clip.
So I was shocked by this number. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation's poll, 1 in 8 Americans are currently taking a GLP-1. Why?
Yes, it was surprising to me too. So I think one of the ways we can understand this is there's this very long history of people seeking out basically the magical elixir for weight loss, right? So I think that's one piece of it. And now we finally have something that rivals the only other effective medical intervention we've had to help people lose weight, which is bariatric surgery. On the other hand, there's a lot of people who are living with diabetes. And I think that's another reason that we see so many people who are on these drugs. In addition, I think these drugs have really met a particular moment, which is this algorithmic social media age. They're everywhere. In the US, we already had this relatively unrestricted approach to marketing pharmaceuticals. We see them advertised everywhere. We've seen this telemedicine kind of industry flourish since COVID, but also around these drugs. And I think that's why we're seeing these kind of shocking numbers.
So
1 in 8 Americans is really high.
That's really high.
Yeah.
I was also surprised by that number, but also like a little bit not surprised because I feel like a lot of people I know are on it. Like it's like fairly commonplace.
Yeah.
In our circles. So
sure.
I can't imagine another drug that has been launched and gotten that kind of uptake so quickly. That's got to be a historical, unprecedented uptake of a drug.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
I can't imagine what would rival that, at least at the pace.
I mean, if you consider obesity to be an epidemic, probably any kind of drug that arrives that treats an epidemic is
like
probably
the COVID vaccine.
Right, exactly. Because it's not I think you can look at it as a lifestyle drug or like almost a cosmetic drug, but really what it is a drug for an epidemic. So I've told you about my conspiracy theory about this, right? They've been testing this drug since the 90s for appetite. I think they ended up using it for diabetes before they ended up using it for weight loss.
Yes.
So my theory is that during the neoliberal era, they wanted obesity to kill people off before they started collecting Social Security and Medicare. But now they need people to be fit and capable and healthy, not just because they need us to go fight in wars and die against China, but also because the national ideal has like degenerated too much. So they need to like sort of pull us back towards like their Nazi propaganda poster pictures.
My conspiracy theory on
What's
it
that?
Is that they need people to eat less. They need.
Oh, they need that to reduce the overall consumption of food?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And
that's really...
It absolutely does that.
Yep.
Like quite very effectively.
Yeah.
It might not make you look like a propaganda poster, but it certainly makes you eat half as much the lunch buffet.
Yeah.
So if you're going into a period of austerity.
Yeah. Or like what is it called when you do the inflation where you reduce the amount, you charge the same amount, but you reduce the amount of food you're getting?
Oh, shrinkflation?
Yeah. So like when you go there won't be like riots because of like Chipotle, like giving you less rice and stuff than they used to.
Yeah, everyone will get like half as big burrito, but then they'll still like leave a little bit because they're all on the big ones. That's just my conspiracy theory. Anyways,
I like it.
people are taking them. So here's a little bit about they're going to talk, they talk a little bit about the diet, like the how it functions for diabetes. And then they start to talk about the way the drug is functioning metabolically and physiologically. So let's listen to a little bit of that.
Okay.
Well, you've written or co-written a whole book about the metabolism. And one of the arguments of that book, one of the arguments of books in this space that I think people don't appreciate is that hunger is a function of the brain. And it's a function of the brain's reaction and predictions about the world around it. And we always have this idea that, people just feel hungry. And then, you should use your brain to decide if you want to eat, but your brain is deciding if you feel hungry and you're sort of fighting its own instincts. So I'd like you to spend a minute on this idea that hunger is a function of the stomach versus hunger is a function of the brain and sort of how researchers moved from one to the other.
Yeah, the way we describe it in the book, we use this analogy of breathing. So if I tell you, take control of your breath right now, breathe more slowly or breathe more quickly or hold your breath, you can take control for short periods of time, but eventually physiology takes over. And the same thing is true of what we eat. So we have this illusion of control over our individual meals and snacks, but there's this symphony of internal signals that's going on inside of us all the time. And the brain is sort of leading this symphony. And the decisions we make are much less a product of conscious control that I think many people appreciate. So when you're taking a GLP-1, you're getting a much higher, longer lasting version of what your body produces. And it has to reach the brain. And the theory is that it's reaching into the part of the brain that usually signals that there's a toxin in circulation. And so that shuts down your appetite. It increases your nausea.
Like what you would get during food poisoning or something?
Exactly. Or what you would have on a these are the most common side effects of these drugs, right? So it reaches into that.
So the wonder drug we've invented is we've made your brain slightly think it's being poisoned all the time?
I think that's one way to put it, absolutely. And so
modernity, baby.
That's incredibly unpleasant discovery.
Well, yeah. So I think there's the whole conversation about, we're tricking our brains into thinking that
it's being slowly poisoned.
What
does that do to
your stress system, right?
Yeah, your unconscious levels of stress.
Yeah, that was my immediate reaction is okay, so you are tamping down things in your brain that govern hunger, or at least things in your brain that help you understand, am I full? Do I need more? Should I delay getting more right now? Because I think that one of the interesting things about hunger is I guess I also am hunger is just what you feel if you need more food in your belly. But it's not that. It's actually your brain, I think, having a bunch of complex signals about what's going on right now, what's going to go on later, what do I think is going to happen, am I under stress, what does the supply chain look like, what's fascinating.
What's happening with the Strait of Hormuz?
Yeah, it's just fascinating. But then I'm if you're tricking your brain to thinking it's being poisoned all the time, and that's why it's saying, chill, don't eat that, then does that not have an effect on your cortisol and your your threat system?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I do this all the time where everything is a matter of willpower, and it's there's all these things happening that are part of your brain and part of your nervous system and functioning that aren't top of brain, and that includes the decisions. Sometimes not just the feeling of hunger, but the decision to eat is not one that you're consciously making,
right.
Or not deliberately making.
Right. And I think, they're going to talk about willpower. They're also going to talk about food noise, the people who experience, if we had a bunch of Doritos on this table, first of all, we'd both be eating them.
Yep.
But second of all, some of us would experience more of the am I going to eat it? I shouldn't eat it. I need to you'd be distracted by it. And that's kind of that's your brain system reacting to that food in a different way than someone who has a different neurobiology might. And that's why, that's why there's a lot of the people who are reporting that they're obese and they lose a lot of weight. But what really matters is that the food noise goes down. The reduction of the food noise has a lot to do with the way their brain is functioning when these choices are in front of them for whatever reason is significantly more activated. So they've got less appetite, but they're also
they're not spending
whatever this mental energy.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a box of pizza in front of me, it doesn't matter how many slices I've had. If there's one left, my brain noise is great. Whatever
really?
It's called. Yeah, it's I cannot. Yeah, the food noise. I can't get it to stop. The pizza has to go away, or I'm just sitting there being I don't need another slice, but I can fit another. But I don't want to eat another slice. There are probably other people who need the slice.
Oh no.
But they're not getting the slice. It's like that. And I don't even hear what people are saying. It's like that.
Oh, I don't have that. I don't have that.
Oh, you don't? Oh, I do.
No, I mean if it's like a bag of those like Cadbury candy coated Easter eggs that I love, I will sit there and eat. If they're within reach, they will be gone. Like Easter comes along and I'm eating chocolate all day. But I don't really have noise about it. I'm just like, today's the day we eat chocolate.
Today I'm giving myself permission. But what about in the days where you're not eating chocolate, you're just not eating, I know I'm not eating chocolate and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of food noise where I'm like, I want like a coffee. I want my special coffee beverage at like 3 p.m. And I have wine noise, but I don't have food noise.
Mia Khalifa, do you know who she is?
No.
She was like the most important porn star for like 3 months.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that medium.
And since then she's become since then she's become a like anti-porn like spokesman and something of like a radical feminist. But she was on Adam Friedland and she talked about being on GLP-1. She said she was overweight as a high schooler, lost the weight, did the porn thing, and felt really exploited after the fact. That for the first time she felt like had some sense of body positivity, she was exploited by the porn industry, and she can't get any of that back. And like everything that she ever did was like filmed within a 3-month span. Anyway, she started taking GLP-1. She said that the reason she takes it is it makes her have a normal relationship with food, and that must be what you talked about. It's like, it changes. It just makes you feel less crazy when food's around.
Yeah, it's doing something in your neurobiology that is changing. Not necessarily like, I don't know. This might just be me. When I think of appetite, I'm like, oh, you're feeling a fullness. It's not really that. It's a much more complicated set of brain processes that are happening than like, you are now 70% full. Like it's like I feel like this belly's filling up and you can't stop. It's not really just that.
Yeah. I've always had like the amount of food I need to feel full and ready to move over for breakfast and lunch is very different than dinner.
Well, dinner's your favorite meal.
Dinner's my favorite meal, and there's like I guess because it's the end of the day, it's sort of like I can't be over.
There's gotta be more to live for. Okay, so they're gonna talk a little bit about the irony of this like toxin in the environment we're in. Okay. And this is where the liberals get so close to making a point, and then
that's what they're like to do, aren't they?
One of the things that I find interesting about the GLP-1s is we basically created this food environment that does not exist in nature, of hyper sugary, hyper fatty, hyper salty, hyper calorie dense foods. Our brains are evolved over very, very long periods of time to treat those as getting, 3 cherries on the salt machine and to really, really want them. So we've put people into this hyper stimulating environment, but we didn't change everybody's brain to turn down the level of hunger when you come into something that is very calorie dense or very sugar dense. And so we've been asking people with these like caveman, all of us, myself, with these caveman brains now surrounded by the fruits of modern industrialized food production, where the Mars company is spending God knows how much on R&D to make my kids want M&Ms. And it doesn't work for people. And then we blame them and tell them they've not done a good job exercising their willpower and self-control.
Just like a liberal to deny any personal responsibility for anybody. Just kidding.
Just kidding. Liberals love personal responsibility. No. Yeah, so they're hitting the interesting point. One of the interesting points here is that we have an extremely fucked up food system that is like, it's very alienating, very commercialized, not really built with like human health at the center, not really built with community health at the center. Takes advantage of like the most exploited and poor people and gives them like the most slop. Then those folks, many of us, and especially folks sort of a lower socioeconomic status, are saddled with horrifying health conditions and then ongoing chronic stress, and it just builds and builds and builds.
Right.
And then you have at the same time, you have a culture that like tells you these are the things that are valuable: thinness, fitness, self-control, willpower,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. So it is a poisonous environment. And they've essentially figured out a drug to remind your brain that it is in fact being poisoned so it can stop itself, which is I guess ironic or fitting, or it seems actually it's fitting. It's just extremely fitting. I don't think they meant to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the only, like, I actually think I probably believe in personal responsibility slightly more than most liberals do, but I think it's absolutely the case that these companies, they understand how your brain works, and they have a lot of very smart people who are being paid a lot of money to figure out how to hack your brain to get you to buy products. There's a reason, like, every single phone chip is red, for example.
Yeah.
Like, it's that basic. And there's not a lot that people... This is the main thing about this, and this, I'm sure this is going to come up a couple of times, is beauty standards are always associated primarily with what is characteristic of the leisure class.
Mm-hmm.
Secondarily, what is harder to come by, right? But primarily what is associated with the leisure class. So you have people who are late stage capitalism produces 3 food environments. One food environment where people can barely get enough food to survive.
Mm-hmm.
That has to exist. It usually happens on the imperial periphery, but there's certainly places in the United States where people can barely get enough food to survive. And so, like, not just like malnutrition, but like literal starvation is a threat for people. Then there is like this mass of working class people who they have access to food, and the food that's produced and supplied to them is like cash crops that are like funneled through the food industry to maximize profit and to compete with each other and to like see how much how much of it we can get you to eat, right? And it's like nutritionally valueless because it's based upon, like I said, these cash crops that they need to figure out they could produce very cheaply and in mass, and then they need to figure out how to distribute that to people. And those folks are like screwed because they have so much to worry about, like getting to work, making sure that they have enough money to pay rent. All this stuff in their lives makes it impossible for them to find time to like work out, to worry about their health, how healthy their choices are, to be able to afford healthy food, yada, yada, yada. And then there's a small group of people that needs to exist too, which is people with the leisure time to go to the gym almost every single day, to be able to afford really nice ingredients, to take the time to cook, right? Or to have someone cook for them. And like this, I guess this pill is supposed to take care of that middle group. What we have is a system where the thing that's very hard to come by, but is primarily associated with the leisure class, becomes the beauty standard. The beauty standard is a social construction based around that. So all these people in the middle who are not doomed, but like have this deck stacked against them enormously because of what they have to do every day and what it takes to achieve that beauty standard, or spend their lives running around feeling bad about themselves, or running around like doing crash diets or this gimmick or that gimmick, trying to achieve what is a much easier thing for people of means. And I think that to me is obviously true because the beauty standard has shifted with the availability of calories. Like if you look back to like Renaissance artwork, the figure that is particularly women that is idealized is much different than what is idealized today. And that's because it used to be the case that having access to food was a lot more difficult. And so poor people were thinner and wealthier people were a little bit bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this interplay of biology, neurobiology, as you're saying it, this thing we call willpower, which is a very poorly specified concept, and then environment. To me, this question of environment is really important. I'll use myself as the example. You know, when I lost a lot of weight, I mean, when I was younger, a lot younger, I was a high school student with nothing to do.
Mm.
And I was able to really, really hold that when I was a young adult. And I have not been able to diet successfully since I had kids because I can't control the food environment. And there's a lot of other things I can control. I have money. I can, go to the gym. I have a certain amount of autonomy over my schedule. So as you say, when you add in things like the night shift, when you add in not having the money to get healthy foods or go to the gym, when you add in having more kids or less time, that willpower works very, very differently when you're able to have the autonomy or the money to create a certain kind of environment around you that is conducive to living in a certain way, right? You're a Hollywood celebrity with a personal chef versus you're a single mother of 4, who works 2 jobs. And this idea that like willpower is some unchanging like muscle inside the mind, as opposed to some reserve discipline that gets depleted. Like if I don't sleep enough, I eat more.
Right, absolutely. And you're designed to eat more when you don't sleep enough. And you're absolutely right that this symphony of internal signals that I was referring to earlier, it's interplaying with our environments.
So one thing I've really appreciated about your work on the GLP-1s as a reporter and as somebody who's very deep in the science is you've done a tremendous amount of interviewing people on them. And you've interviewed many of the kinds of people, and again, to me, this has always been the cruelty of this conversation, who were exercising a tremendous amount of constant willpower, going on and off, like very restrictive diets, losing 30 pounds, gaining it back. What is it like for them, for the people who've seen huge amounts of weight loss? How do they describe the experience of being on a GLP-1 versus what it's like off of one?
I think the big common thread for people in whom the drugs are effective for weight loss is this idea that suddenly this willpower that they were always searching for, that they feel they didn't have enough of, suddenly they have it. Suddenly it's not that hard to say no to the extra piece of cake or the cake altogether. They're eating smaller portions. Their cravings change. Like they have this there's a lot of discussion about food noise. When the cake is there, 30 to 50% of your brain is on the cake, or you have cravings that distract you. A lot of people say that this just disappears.
I mean, I think the discussion of what willpower actually is, people have notions that people who are fat they lack discipline.
Yes.
And this like comes into like probably our puritanical values in the United States, partially about like what's virtuous and that discipline and like going without, being sort of stoic and, having simple, strict lifestyle is a virtue. And I think that it's a way to blame people for not adhering to like beauty norms, or not being able to, not having good health outcomes, or not taking care of themselves. Like you're blaming the victim in this case for the problem.
Right.
And I think this like they don't quite go there, but this discussion of what is willpower really, like if you're on, like, for example, if you're fighting up against a neurobiology and a food environment that is essentially bombarding you with sensory signifiers, things that are signifying to you that you need to consume more, or you're looking for more, you're seeking more, and you have a neurobiology that's already gone haywire with its understanding of what is coming into it, what the hunger cues might mean, because it's getting like things that our bodies aren't really meant to be consuming, and you just happen to have a neurobiology that's a little bit more noisy when it comes to this stuff. Like just existing in that environment probably takes a fair amount of willpower.
Yeah.
So I think that the science here is pretty underdeveloped. I don't think people fully understand these brain systems.
Yeah.
And what's happening. But I do think that like it's not just that the noise goes away. It's that people are actually reporting like, I feel like I can exhibit this thing called willpower that everyone's been telling me I haven't had. But I don't think this willpower thing is actually the thing.
No.
Like, I think that's a misnomer. They're saying I finally feel capable of willpower because they've been fed this lie that that's what they're failing.
Yeah. I'm tempted to say that, generally speaking, the diversity of people's reaction to food, like, there's obviously people who have less discipline in general terms than other people, right? And is that nature versus nurture? I don't know. There's also certainly people who, like, their mental health, their trauma and stuff has hugely affected their relationship with food. But if you take all that stuff out,
well, I think this relates to that too.
Yeah, of course it does, right? And like, asking someone who's like eating to self-soothe, right, to have quote unquote willpower is like you have a problem. It would be the same thing as like telling someone who is the only thing that makes them feel some sense of inner peace is taking a walk, and you tell them, well, actually walking is going to kill you. You have to stop. It's like we need other tools and other like ways of dealing with that problem. But if you put all that to aside, just the diversity of people's genetics are going to have them respond to the food environment they're in different ways, right? With some people having an easier time not eating certain things and other people being more like susceptible, and that gets interpreted, like you said, as willpower. I think that the people who like want to make it all about personal responsibility and willpower are basically social Darwinists when it comes down to it. It's that there's the temptation is to say they would never do anything to threaten profit, right? So if the profiteers have decided this is the food system you're in, then your inability to like resist it means that you have been selected out by the system or by reality. So, but some of them wouldn't even go that far. They just say like, if you can't, then you deserve the consequences. It's a moral failing.
Right.
But how do you think about GLP-1s as possibly a pharmaceutical accelerator of, fairly dangerous body expectations? Because now it's like, well, if you want to look thinner, why not just go on a GLP-1?
I think that's absolutely a strand in this conversation and in this moment that we're living in. The place that it freaks me out the most is I talk to pediatricians who are prescribing the drugs in children. There's no screening yet for these drugs and eating disorders in young people, and they anecdotally have seen people use these as aids for essentially eating disorders and kind of exacerbating eating disordered behavior. One of the underlying assumptions of the health at every size or fat activism or body positivity movements was that you can't control your body size, therefore you must accept it. We had surgery before, it wasn't as accessible or scalable, but now we do have this medication where people do have the option, right?
Or at least the ones who are sensitive to it.
And the ones who can afford it and access it and all of that, right? We've seen influential people in the body positivity, fat activism movement come forward and really grapple with starting on these drugs and losing weight on them. And one thing that those movements did that was really important was highlight how much shame and stigma people who are living with obesity face every day, especially women.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So Ezra is sort of saying, he's pointing out like that if you put these drugs out there, people are going to pursue this more and more people are going to pursue and brag about and commercialize and show this unattainable beauty standard. And we'll see more eating disorders. We'll see more extremely thin celebrities. You earlier pointed out that maybe once that beauty standard is so easy to get, it'll shift again. But I think he's sort of sticking with this just becomes an eating disorder like heyday.
The assumption being that like people who do not need to lose weight will now start using it to get even thinner. So it'll be like a accelerant to
there's always
like a race to the bottom, basically.
There's always been these like subcultures online, especially for young girls and young women who are like, here are all the best tips that you can do to like really hack your own body so you're barely eating anything. And obviously GLP-1s will be a very obvious hack for that.
Right.
Also children and people, adolescents being prescribed it has to be more dangerous because you're literally slowing down your body's metabolic system, which is definitely different if you're also trying to grow.
Sure.
I agree that what has happened, I've seen it of people in my life, is that people are getting thinner. More people are thinner. More celebrities are thinner. More Real Housewives are thinner. People who were like on like you're like a size 8 Real Housewives are now like size 2 Real Housewives.
Right.
And so it does shift. It's at the media you're being served. It certainly shifts what you think is attainable or required.
Yeah, or what's normal.
Or what's normal.
Yeah. I'm interested to what you think that will mean for beauty standards in the future, because it would seem to suggest to me that just the thinness of today will no longer hold such a premium. I think it'll still be associated with the leisure class, or that's the primary thing, and that won't be erased, but the difficulty of achieving it will be tamped down quite a bit. And there'll be like a bigger difference between like people who cannot sustain like using it. They can't get the prescription, they can't keep the prescription, they can't afford it, they can't take it every day, etc. And then the this sort of middle group that can.
Yeah, I mean, it's not particularly good for building muscle or muscle tone. So I could imagine that the beauty standards still is like, we want you to be a size 2 and we want you to be like
That's it. Yeah.
toned and, you
Yeah.
know,
The person who's on
a gym girly and yeah.
Right. The person who's on Ozempic, so they're thin, but also get to spend 2 hours in the gym every day, is going to have a different body than someone who's on Ozempic and is working 8 to 10 hours a day.
Right.
So that I think that's exactly right. And that's I mean, talk about a nightmare for people who are like, they're going to be thin for the first time in their lives, and then they're going to find themselves in the shifting sand of like, being thin is no longer like, you need to be jacked and thin. Like, you're not going to look like
it's a nightmare.
A Superman just by taking.
It's a nightmare for all of us because it just means that there continues to be an unattainable, unhealthy, deliberately inaccessible beauty standard that, because of our media atmosphere, is you're bombarded with not just the imagery, like the imagery. I grew up with the images of it, and I used to get like the fitness magazines as like the way to get these images that were like, I guess, meant to be inspiring, but really were just like to fuck with your head.
Right.
But now
airbrush to hell. Yeah. Here's the inspiration.
Yeah. But now it's on these kids' Instagram and TikTok feeds, and they're being sold stuff. Like, you're a click away from buying like peptides from China.
Yeah.
So it's, and that's like, yes, there's always been like weight loss drugs, and teenage girls have always been taking shit to try to lose weight. But like, now that's we've also normalized that is the way to manage this part of your life.
Yeah.
I also think so her point about fat activism and how part of that, she claims that part of the underlying assumption of that health at every size kind of movement is that we don't really have control over our body size, so you just accept it. I don't know if she's like the expert on the philosophy of fat activism, so
I would doubt that
take it at face value.
I think most people probably in that community would say, no, we don't start with that assumption. We start with the assumption that health is disconnected from your size, and then we start with a contemplation about what your natural size is.
Well, she highlights that something has shifted. If you now have there's now a much more accessible way to control your size.
Yeah.
Which may or may not have other downstream health effects. And the point that there's influential body positivity people that are like, I'm going on this drug and here's my journey, is true. I've seen some of them on my feed, but also New York Times, who is of course hosting this video, also has a video about a big fat influencer and her experience like leaving the body positivity like field because she felt it was killing her and her journey to start to lose weight and how she was treated. So
the thing about this, which has, I think, sparked the fit at any size movement, is this really toxic, grotesque relationship between beauty standards and weight that's completely different from the conversation about health and weight. And the two have been blended together in a way that's like perfectly designed to like psychically torture people. And that's like the implication that she's making is that these body positivity people were not really believing what they said because they felt trapped in their body and they tried to normalize something that they felt trapped in. I think most of them would say, no. What I'm saying is it's a lie that people are taught from a very early age that health and body size is connected, and that a lot of the science running through this is built upon a social construction or an assumption, which is not true. And I should be this whatever size I am and should not have any comments about my health. Now, I don't think that's true. I think that, and if people have like a bunch of research to hit me with, I'm happy to hear it. I think probably
I got some research from the fat activist who renounced it.
I mean, and this is part of they also had one of these ones that was like the DEI, former DEI people that renounced it. So there's they're doing a whole like we're gonna every woke thing was actually a lie, and we're gonna have the people themselves tell you why it was a lie. And I'm not very impressed by that, but good.
I think the New York Times is part of this like cultural propaganda of we're backlashing against everything that was woke or identity politics or progressive, and the fat activism is part of it. And something shifts fundamentally if you have access suddenly to a type of drug. If you have actual access to like scaled access to a drug that allows a certain level of weight loss that has not been available to people before.
What has shifted?
Well, I think people will opt for that. And I think
People who had previously were committed to the idea that their size was a non-issue, except for the way that society has treated.
right. And I think that in these like super identity based like subcultures online, that is considered like that makes you a traitor.
Right. It is. I mean, if you authentically believed that there was nothing wrong with your body the way that it was, you would not take this drug. There's nothing to be fixing by taking the drug.
I just think that the stakes of it being like you either are like you're either like anti-fat phobia or you're like fat phobic, and therefore like you're either in this movement or you're not in this movement, and you can't opt to be a smaller weight. That's all absolutely false.
I think here's the thing that needs to be separated out, which is why I've always been uncomfortable with the fitted any size thing as part of a larger conversation about fat phobia. It seems to me that fat phobia has absolutely nothing to do with health whatsoever. That people are scolded on a health dynamic, but that actually has nothing to do with it. That it's all a social construction. There's two parts of it. There's a smaller part, which is big people take up more space, and that is regarded as like selfish and inconvenient because it can cut into profits, like people needing more space on airplanes or on the train or things like this. That's a small part of it. And that's a material thing. The bigger thing is that people are taught that fat people are disgusting and should be treated badly, and they should be ashamed of themselves. They should walk around and carry a certain amount of shame, and that's deserved, and that everyone should participate in that. Right. And one of the ways that you participate in that is you lecture them about health, but you don't care about their health. Right. And I know that this is true because people do unhealthy, self-destructive things all the time and are not subjected to public ridicule constantly for those choices. Just look at cigarettes. Cigarettes are as dangerous, if not more dangerous, and there's almost no there is like a general understanding that they're unhealthy, but like you're gross. There are people who hate it. There are people who say they don't like the smell. They would never date someone who is a smoker because they don't like the smell of stuff. But this like public, social, cultural ridicule doesn't exist.
Well, one of our kids just seemed to be really shaming.
about I think they're bewildered more than anything else, which is probably a good place to be when it comes to cigarettes. But so I think there's a whole conversation to have about there are some people in the world who are working through issues. There's some people in the world whose neurobiology is a certain way. There's certain people whose actual physical biology is a certain way such that they are going to be large. Mm-hmm. And they should not be treated badly because of that. Period. The end. They should be this idea that beauty only looks one way should be completely deconstructed and thrown out. We should challenge that whenever we come across it. And also we can say that like the research seems to indicate that like being overweight is not good for your health. Right. And if you are able to, right, prioritize that in the light of all the other things you have to prioritize.
And you want to.
Yeah, and you want to be healthy because people make unhealthy decisions all the time. But the two should not be as connected as they are. I will say, however, the problem with that is almost everyone taking this drug is concerned about the beauty standard and not concerned about their health.
Well, I don't think you say that.
I will bet you that
there's a lot of people taking the drug because they have diabetes.
Sure. But I would say that of the recent adopters who are using it for weight loss, 9 out of 10 of them are primarily motivated by their appearance.
I'm less cynical than that, but I completely agree with everything you said. And I think it's pretty obvious the New York Times is in the midst of doing like a series of hit pieces. They're supposed to convince us all we're in a complete backlash against every woke thing that's ever happened, whether or not that's true. I'm looking at a video that they published in February called Confessions of a Former Body Positivity Influencer. And the caption they went with is, "Can you love your body and still want to lose weight?" Which is just an absurd sort of clickbaity nonsense question to ask. However, I watched this video, and what was most clear about this was not that there's a backlash against like fat activism, or that now like fat phobia is okay, or that
there's a lot more of it online.
GLP-1 is going to destroy, people having body positivity.
Sure.
What seemed most clear about this video was that these online subcultures that are promoting sort of whatever ideas they have about fat phobia or body positivity or looks maxing are very likely to become extreme and insular. And we're quite unhappy with this woman when she was like, I need to lose weight to take care of my health. Because she was attacked. And I know the New York Times is using this as clickbait, but I do think that speaks to something that is very wrong about how all of these communities function, not just like the fat activism community or the looks maxing community.
Yeah.
It literally,
what is
like,
it? Once you're in it, you have to stay in it.
Right.
Yeah.
It was like she was treated as like, a traitor for making a different choice. And like, that's absurd.
Yeah. This is the part of wokeness which I think is the most suspicious, which is that you cannot describe things where they come from, why they're like this way. You can't normalize that or advocate for people to be treated well. It has to be good in every respect.
Yeah.
It has to be ideologically pure to the point where you can't say it's good in the following ways, it's bad in the following ways, or it happened. There's reasons why it happened. We can fix why it happened.
I'm gonna say something controversial and I don't care. I actually feel kind of guilty for being a part of this movement. Health is real. Organs failing is real. Diabetes, heart disease, all that is real, okay? It's not fat phobic to care about your health. And this is coming from someone who's learning those lessons now, myself.
And the backlash was massive.
I've literally been seething with anger.
It's blowing my mind how fat phobic you've become.
You should know better and do better.
The body positivity community branded me a pariah. And so I left. I want to lose more weight, but I still feel a lot better than I did before. I feel a lot more like myself. Let me be clear. Not every fat person is unhealthy. Not every skinny person is healthy.
A viral rise in skinny talk.
Skinny talk, dark side of social media,
encourages disordered eating.
If you want to get skinny, you need to gaslight yourself to skinny.
View food as something that is optional always.
Not everyone can control their weight, and no one should be mistreated for it. But what's not fat phobic is this. Being fat does increase your risk of health problems. Studies show obese people are about 6 times more likely to develop type 2 diabetes. We have a 28% greater risk of heart disease. We have higher risk for 13 types of cancer. Up to 7 times the risk for endometrial cancer. Up to 5 times the risk for esophageal cancer. Colon, rectal, pancreatic, kidney. Higher risk of strokes. We can still be body positive while acknowledging these risks. We can still love ourselves, even if we want to lose weight. That's what real body positivity should stand for. Loving yourself at any size and having the freedom to change it.
I mean, what does she mean when she says I feel more like myself? I mean, that's the thing is like
that body positivity should be, body positivity should, I would think, embrace her making choices that she wants to make about her body. Because there are messages we're doing this in a soup of messages about what you should look like, what you shouldn't look like, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. Like, there's no purity here. You're not going to sit there and be like, I'm going to make decisions about my body that the patriarchy hasn't impacted me, that capitalism hasn't impacted me. You're just going to do the best you can, and it's going to be some version of all these social constructions. So I don't know.
Would you say that about race, though? Like, people are, white is more beautiful than black, therefore people are just going to do... You would say no. We have to staunchly and fiercely contradict that narrative as whenever it appears. We have to say black is beautiful, is as beautiful as white. I don't want to hear about how you feel more like yourself when you've lit light in your skin.
But your body, I do think is different because your body is not the shape and size and health and display of your body is constantly changing as a human.
Right.
It's not like race.
Right. Which
means you're going to be in many different forms, and you're going to be perceived differently, and you're going to have different priorities. Like, I'm nursing twins right now. That's like the major priority of what I want to do with my body.
Right.
And it's not going to look like my body is going to not function or look the same in 20 years. And it didn't function or look the same 20 years ago. I think there's media literacy about what you're being sold as far as images, and literacy about your own health, and fluency in understanding what makes you feel good, how do you feel when you feel good in your body. Those things are things we should be teaching people. But I don't know that you can be prescriptive about like, oh, well, the beauty standard says thin is better than fat, so therefore you can't want to choose to be thin because that's giving into fat phobia. Like that's the race analysis. That will be the race analogy, right? You can't choose to look white because that's giving into anti-black racism.
You can't choose to be thin. People can make whatever choices they want, but I think that we should be analytical. We should be critical of, or like wary of, the instinct to become thinner because of the beauty standard or any other thing. And I would say, like, right now, if you're prioritizing nursing twins over being fit, quote unquote, that you could say you're less fit than you were or will be, but you are not less beautiful than you were or will be. Like that I think needs to be broken. That connection needs to be broken.
Very sweet.
Okay.
But like I mean, that seems a little idealistic.
It's only idealistic, I think, because it's harder to see because of the influence of health in the equation and the ways in which that the beauty standard is so ingrained and so foundational to our way we evaluate people. I don't think it's impossible for us to have very different attitudes about what is like attractive or what is
I agree with that.
Okay.
I don't really agree that there's objective beauty, that there should be objective beauty standards, but
there isn't. I mean, it's a descriptive question. There is not objective beauty standards.
So you think I'm beautiful now and in 20 years, but that doesn't mean I am it's. I don't think you're gonna ever not have commentary in society about what is beautiful or what people find beautiful or what is you might have a less commercialized version. You might have a much more diverse version, but people are going to want to modify their body to look certain ways based on ideas they have and their community has about ways of looking.
I guess I disagree with you on this. I think that all of that is a function of class society, and that goes away with class society. All it will be left with is health.
So we will seek beauty in art, but not in our bodies.
We will see beauty that is much more individualized. In other words, people's sense of their personal preferences around beauty will be much less fixed around a certain point.
Yeah, I think,
and all the stuff that feeds into that, creating a certain ideal and then pushing people to the ideal, almost all of that has to do with profit.
I agree.
And marketing and blah, 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 blah. And once that goes away, people will have a very diverse opinions about what is attractive to them, what their personal preferences are.
I think the homogenization and the commercialization has made it very strict beauty standards.
Mm-hmm.
And that won't be true.
It'll be like personality, right? Everyone wants to be the best version of their own personality, but people's taste and personality and people they date is very, very diverse.
Some people should definitely not be the best version of their own personality. They should be a different personality.
Maybe. But
it's a bad example because an antisocial personality has no fucking place in our communism. So
I guess that's true.
Right. I mean, people, so you believe people will modify their bodies and dress and decorate their bodies. And their bodies will, what they're doing to it when they're 20 and what they're doing to it when they're 40 will probably be different in this classless society.
Sure, yeah.
And you believe, but you do not believe there'll be trends or preferences that are more popular preferences or ideas about what to look like that people will chase after. You don't believe that? I mean, at least there will be biologically. I bet we'll turn back to we like boobs and butts because those things give us babies.
No, because the size of your boobs have nothing to do with how much you can nurse your children. So it won't be material thing.
It is material. If you have extra fat on your body, you're more likely to be able to give birth to and take care of babies during periods of strife.
Okay. I
mean, that you might not be in that period, and your biology might need to be tamped down a little bit. Hey, buddy, we're not starving here. I don't know. It depends on how utopic your utopia is, I guess.
I mean, so one thing is, I personally believe that breasts are sexualized in our culture and are actually not a natural, quote unquote.
But butts,
I disagree. Butts are different. I think butts are different. And I think honestly, I think that's scientifically backed up.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be a role for biology in these things,
and butts,
and the butts will always have a high premium. Sorry, people who don't have butts,
There might be a pill for that.
Regrow your butt. But I think that art and artistic trends and fashion trends will have much less to do with beauty and attractiveness, because all those things have a lot to do with value, your value as a person, and almost all of it, that value is based upon like class distinction. So I think there will be trends like these kinds of earrings are like in fashion, or like these kinds of statements about what people wear and how they wear it will be in fashion, but it'll have very little to do with like their value as like a sexual partner. That's my suspicion.
So do you have a judgment or opinion on people in our culture choosing to get thinner?
No, I understand it. No,
I know you can empathize and understand it, but like, do you think that's a misguided waste of time? Like, I mean, there's material reasons to do it. Women who are fatter get paid less, but like,
right.
So we can literally make practical arguments, and then we can make practical health arguments. But if we take all of those things away, do you think that that's like a similar to being like, well, it's easier to be white. Well, it's easier to be a cis man. So I'm gonna go towards that.
I think to answer your question, I'll say this. I think that the association of body size with value and attractiveness has done a lot of damage to everyone in the society. Fat people, skinny people.
No arguments.
And that I think that people are all figuring out ways of dealing with that damage. And I think that the more that we can uplift the idea that this thing in you that tells you that you're going to one day you'll be worth the treatment you deserve once you get your body weight under control is something we should resist. But I don't judge people's personal decisions or mine. I mean, this is a struggle that I have too. I don't judge people's personal decisions on how to deal with it or their own relationship with that journey.
Should we not be considering resisting a drug that an enormous number of adults are going on that is going to create many more thin people, many more thin celebrities, many more markets of people to push thinness to? You don't think that that's kind of like a brain worm?
No, because it has to do with health too. That's the thing. Is it happens in this case to also be about health. You could say, I think you could make a very like medical ethics argument that in cases where there is no obvious health benefit, you should not prescribe it. But we have cosmetic surgery, elective cosmetic surgery, so that's
I have a segue for that though. I have a segue for that.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm not going to play this clip, but they found she was doing a survey of people who are on GLP-1, people who did and did not see benefits that they expected to see. 63% of people in her survey said even though the drug did not work for what it was originally prescribed for, in this case weight loss, they wanted to stay on it.
What was the reason? Stated reason? Because it had other unintended impacts that they liked?
So, I mean, you have to do like, I didn't dig into her study. I think there could be a lot of placebo effect here because people, think this is a miracle drug. And they think a lot about like, if it can make you lose weight, what else could it do? But she has one story of someone who had post-concussion syndrome for almost a decade. And she was suffering with like terrible symptoms. She basically couldn't function. And she started the drug and she stopped experiencing the symptoms. And then there's people who describe like other types of noise in their life, whether it's, even if they don't lose weight, the food noise or the other addictive behaviors are getting much easier to manage, or like the evasiveness of those thoughts in their life. They also have there's some signals that there could have impact on like being a protector against Alzheimer's. So there's a lot about this drug that they don't know. But for some reason, she's getting this. She did not expect this result. But she's doing the survey, and people are like, I'm going to stay on it.
Yeah.
And so there's something going on. So there's a little bit like, should people who don't really have a real health reason be on it? I don't know. But now I don't know if this is just
most of those were health
bullshit hype.
Yeah.
Well, no, but they went on it to lose weight.
Right. But they found other, the question is like if they found non-health related benefits.
Well, I think
should society pay for it? Should they be allowed to pay for it? Should the doctor be allowed to prescribe it?
I've talked to people who reported reversals of alcoholism, reversals of the desire to smoke, reversals of sex addiction. The trials to date have been mixed, and the researchers who study reward are quite cynical that these results are going to endure. But the way it has been described to me is that for a long time, we've known that if you make rodents hungry, they're more likely to have addictive behaviors. They're more likely to get hooked on cocaine to push the cocaine lever, I guess, to give.
Oh, that's really interesting.
So hunger, they know, has overlapping brain pathways with other like motivated or motivated, addicted, and dopamine seeking behaviors.
Okay.
And so they don't understand the mechanisms.
Yeah, you might be tempted to say that the dopamine addiction is driving the hunger and the other addictive behaviors. But this model kind of says that like the hunger creates a general craving for dopamine that's associated.
Well, and if you think about
sense.
hunger not as actually happening in your gut, but happening in your brain, it could just be activating like the same. It's basically, it could, I don't know. I'm not a neuroscientist, but
You're not?
it seems to me.
Wait,
that, like,
what if this whole marriage is based upon this idea that you're a neuroscientist? You're telling me now?
There's also people that report going on it and have anhedonia, where you're just like nothing feels good, everything is bad, including Ezra. Ezra was on it and came back off it because he was like, life sucks. He was like, I don't want to eat anything, but I don't want to do anything else either. So that's a very
That's a side effect of the GLP-1.
Yeah.
They're like you lose sort of a zest for life.
You can. People who are really sensitive, because in some ways, if you think, I mean, I'm not a neuroscientist, but if the area of your brain that's like all like noisy about things you want to do and desire and like getting your kicks in completely shuts down, you kind of are left with like, well, what do I desire?
This might have more to do with the emptiness of Ezra Klein's life than anything else.
Well, it wasn't just Ezra.
Okay. Right.
He's not alone.
Okay.
Let's pivot to the FDA, shall we?
Yeah.
Well, I think it reflects this way in which you have to trust something. The world is simply too complex for anybody to have firsthand knowledge of very much of it at all. So you can trust established authorities like the FDA and the CDC, but if you lose trust in them, you have to still find some way of deciding what to believe and what not to believe. And a lot of people choose individual voices, Andrew Huberman or Joe Rogan or Peter Attia, or people further into the Maha world. And I'm not even saying they're necessarily corrupt, but if you're in media, for instance, and you run a podcast on health and wellness week after week, you have to find new things to say. Just getting on the mic every week and saying, here's another week when you should eat whole foods and try to reduce your stress and sleep well, it doesn't last. Even putting aside the fact that some of them are getting a cut of either supplement companies or advertising for it, they have this huge bias towards the next new thing.
And it was always there, right? I spent a lot of time earlier in my reporting career with you at Vox, like looking at Dr. Oz. And I remember once interviewing him years ago, and he said, that I think I said, like, why do you have the magic and miracles on your show? Like, you're a cardiothoracic surgeon. This isn't research-based. It was a question like that. And he said, if I didn't have the magic and miracles, I wouldn't have a show. I think there's also something that, like, the very sound advice, the very sound scientific foundation we have for how to optimize your health, it's so boring, right? It's what you said. It's like sleep more, have social relationships, eat more vegetables. It's the stuff your mom has been saying to you since you were in your high chair. And yeah, but to have the podcast or to have the social media feed, you need to have this new advice. I totally agree with you.
My mother never said anything like that to me when I was in my high chair.
I can't recollect.
Only the special ones can.
It's funny to hear Ezra Klein be like, these podcasters are just coming up with BS to say every week. It's like, dude, like, have you read your books?
I mean, I think he's right. Like, I stumbled across a guy who was like fit, and he was showing like a meal he would eat that has like a certain amount of calories, but like much more volume than a meal that he might reject. And it was inspiring, but like, how many times are you gonna do that real? Like, you can't market like a handful of kale and some nuts and stuff. Like there's no profit there. So there's incentive for these guys to like find something that just only I know about it, and tomorrow I'm going to know about something new, so you have to tune in next week, and
But we're doing this big experiment on the population because of diseases that really are preventable if we do the things that we've long known we need to do, like restricting junk food marketing to kids, figuring out ways to make healthy food more accessible. It enrages me as a person who struggled with my weight before, like this realization that this was preventable. I didn't have to suffer like that. And kids, like the kids who are now going through this now, they don't have to suffer like this.
I feel like I've heard this argument as long as I've been touching this issue, which, like, as you know, the beginning of my career as a healthcare reporter. And we would debate food deserts and what would happen if we put, good grocery stores in food deserts. And we did this in a bunch of places and it didn't really work. I've become very cynical about this. I mean, yes, it would be much better if everybody was like wrapped around with, more walkable places to live and better and healthy foods. And I don't think you should be able to advertise junk food at all to children. I think it should be illegal to have Paw Patrol on kids' cereals. I think this whole thing where we allow endless advertising to children is completely insane. And it makes every parent's life in the grocery store a nightmare, myself included. And for the society at large, I think the problem is people want things that aren't good for them.
But we've never done enough.
But people don't want you to do enough.
But which people? I feel like
the people who vote. Like this happened in New York. Bloomberg wanted to tax sodas.
I think
they almost ran him out of town on a rail.
Okay, no, but I think the politics of this are changing. I think like more and more people are raising kids with diseases like diabetes and fatty liver. And they're aware that this is caused by the food environment. And I feel like that the politics there is shifting, but we've never done the inversion of our food environment that we need to do. It's going to take many, many levers to really see an impact. And that really hasn't been done.
I've just become, I think you would need a level of paternalism for that I guess what I would say about it is that there is not a single jurisdiction in this entire country where the politics of that have worked. Like we cannot point at one thing, one place, one state, one city where we've been able to do that much. If it were there to do, I would be the first one to say we should do it, but I don't think it's there to do. Like the public health community, we tried to get people to take vaccines in the aftermath or the math during a deadly pandemic. And it led to the largest public health backlash in my lifetime, such that RFK Jr. is now the Secretary of Health and Human Services. People's sensitivity to paternalism is very, very, very high. It's a very potent political force.
But I think one thing that I'm talking about and that we write about in the book, it's not about taking people's fried chicken or their M&Ms away. It's about making a food environment where the healthy options are as accessible as the unhealthy stuff. And so I'm living now in France, and obviously the politics are completely different. There's no shortage of chocolatiers, of places where I can buy croissant, brioche, like all these things that I know I shouldn't be eating every day, but as accessible are the healthy options. So they've done things like fresh food markets in every district. They minimize the size of grocery stores through land use planning since the late 1800s, like using school lunches as a lever to feed children healthfully. And over time, they've become more and more avant-garde about what that actually means. They pull all these different levers. But what we're talking about, I think, is creating this regulatory environment around chronic disease. Like, how do you protect the public from developing these diseases like obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease? And it seems like impossible now because it does involve these radical changes to the food environment. But America did this over 100 years ago, right? When we started to protect people against acute food poisoning. It was Wild West. They were putting calf brains in milk at this time and putting brick dust to dye food in a certain way and lead. That's where the FDA came from. That's where the meat inspection program of the USDA came from after the publication of Upton Sinclair's book. And
that is a really important and interesting conversation. I began by being sympathetic to Klein's argument because I do think that the population in general does not want someone like Ezra Klein lecturing them about what they should be eating.
They definitely don't want Ezra Klein taking away their Paw Patrol cereal. He's getting his ass kicked.
And I hate Bloomberg, and I hated the Bloomberg's attempt to fix this. But I think
why?
Well, but then I started to think about it more, and I think she has the right of it. Ezra Klein is saying we couldn't have this in a democracy because you need to be incredibly elitist and paternalistic to actually achieve this. Bloomberg's approach was paternalistic.
Yes.
That was why it failed. You need to have one is you need to go after the companies and not the consumer. But two is you need to have a robust public health campaign that is tied into improving people's access and resources. No one would vote against having better, higher quality food for kids if it costs the same.
Well,
people would complain about a tax hike to do that, but if it costs the same, no one would say I'm against that. No one would say I want my kids eating Doritos. Why are you giving them this fresh, healthy, nutritious, tasty food?
And obviously the counterexample is sitting there for him. He does have a current mayor of New York who is proposing a grocery store plan that isn't necessarily obviously a public health first idea, but these city run grocery stores are an attempt for accessible, healthy foods available to everyone in the city. And people voted for that. People wanted that. I think Ezra's bizarrely cynical here. I think he's kind of like, he's right. He's like mad that the liberals can't be elite and paternalistic and force all the MAGA people to give up their Cheetos. And so he's like saying, we don't get to have nice things in this country because everybody is just committed to this sort of where they're at. And the amount of government intervention would be too high. And he's not interested in more government intervention.
No, he is.
Well,
it doesn't feel like you could achieve it.
I think he's also
through like democratic.
But he also plays a very particular role where he's the foil to social democrats. So he wants a certain level of intervention, but nothing that looks to AOC or Mondani.
Right, which are like this is the irony here. Is like his understanding of paternalism is you don't give people a choice because you have enough political power and systematic power to prevent them from having a choice. Paternalism is actually well-educated leisure class people who have a huge platform telling you what's good for you without having a conversation with you about it. That's actually paternalistic. There's a counterexample to that so people can visualize it. There's a really good book written about the healthcare system in China right after the Chinese Revolution called Away with All Pets. And one of the really neat anecdotes in the book is their attempt to deal with the syphilis epidemic. And they framed it in terms of a class struggle. They framed it in terms, and so what you have is not paternalism. You have the entity which can discipline the society to stop killing itself is the people itself. Yeah. But you have to give them the political power and like a reason to do that. He's not willing to do that. Sure. So what he's left with is this shallow understanding of democracy, which is that these people don't really have political power or ideas worth engaging with, but they still have enough political power to like be mad when you fuck with their personal choices.
I agree. And I think your example would further prove that we cannot have this in the current America.
Correct. That is absolutely
and because I mean there was, public health people who have their degrees in public health, they know this. This is how you are effective. You do grassroots public education. You bring the people who are impacted into the conversation and the design early. This is how you do public health. This is how you get buy-in for vaccines. This is how you make sure people go take prenatal vitamins. And they did decent public health around the COVID vaccine. And he's right. We are in a complete backlash. And I think it's because this is not Mao's China. There's not collectivism. There's a very distrusted set of institutions.
Yeah.
Like all of the government institutions are distrusted. All of the academic institutions are distrusted. Certainly the pharmaceutical companies are. So like it's very challenging in that environment to roll out any policies like this.
Yeah. No one is saying any of this without getting paid to say it. And so you can't trust any of it. The guy who's telling you that to leave people alone, that they should have the right to eat whatever they want, and that fat people, that's just a lack of personal responsibility, are getting paid. People are like, no one should be allowed to have Cheetos. Those people are getting paid. So,
and even if they're not getting paid directly, there's a lot of cultural and social division that is fueling a lot of this. And there's very little. There are very few institutions that are based on like solidarity that are in these conversations. So like so people turn to their favorite podcast hosts, which hopefully are John Paul and Simone, but could be Joe Rogan, to get their information about what to put in their bodies. So they're going to pivot a little bit to.
You probably shouldn't. You should have looked to us to figure out what to put in your body.
I mean, it sounds like it's pizza or wine.
Yeah.
We're heavy pizza noise, heavy wine noise people.
Yeah. We're also introducing a nutritional supplement that you can buy from our website.
Yeah, just
it's what happens when you put pizza and wine into a blender and then fill a little capsule with it.
It's a $29.99 monthly subscription, and you can't cancel it. Okay, they're gonna talk a little bit about like
or they win.
WTF with RFK Jr. and then we're gonna wrap.
Okay.
But I hear you. It's going to be very difficult. I do think the politics are changing. So we're in a moment where like places like California and West Virginia are both looking at, doing things like reducing ultra processed foods in school lunches and banning certain additives. So really politically distinct places, and people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Trump and the former FDA Commissioner David Kessler, what they're saying about diet-caused diseases, you can't tell who's saying it anymore.
That's true, but I've been extremely disappointed by by Kennedy. I've been extremely disappointed to see that even the parts of Maha that I thought made sense, like, have made it nowhere, right? You will watch Kennedy now at like eating his tallow fried French fries and, go into like these fast food restaurants that, if they really wanted to make America, the American food environment better, like they could. Meanwhile, the president of the United States is like forcing RFK Jr. to eat McDonald's and photo ops.
Right.
Like their actual willingness when it came down to it to take on industry was extremely low.
No, absolutely.
Like if you listen to what they're saying, it's fine. Have they done anything that will in a sustained way change the food environment for people? I would love to have seen Maha ban, advertising to kids. They didn't.
No, the way I think about it is you had the new nutrition guidelines come out, which had this great message, eat real food, right? But no one is doing anything to make it easier for the people who actually really struggle to afford and access real food to eat that food, right? It's like there's something like 3 million fewer people on SNAP. And that's something that the administration has made it more and more difficult for people to access.
Yeah, and huge cuts are continuing to go into effect there.
And there were programs to make local and fresh produce available for school lunches, and those have been cut. And then there's a lot of tweaking at the edges of, swap out high fructose corn syrup with cane sugar, or focusing on certain food additives. And there's such marginal problems in the greater system. If you really want to help more Americans eat real food, you're going to have to do a lot more than that. And you're going to have to focus on the segments of society that were on food stamps, for example. So I completely agree. I think a lot of the rhetoric has been in the right place. Like, this is the first time I've seen at that political level people talking about the food environment and saying, these diseases are preventable and they are caused by these environmental factors, taking the pressure off individuals. But then a lot of the solutions that have been proposed have also been focused on individuals, like give Americans more wearable devices and continuous glucose monitors. It's not the intensity of the intervention that I think we actually need.
That's exactly it. The genius of the Maha movement is that it is sort of saying to people, there are these systems, these institutions, these conspiracies, these bad actors that have made your health environment no longer like in your control.
Yeah.
There's dye in your food. There's, high fructose corn syrup in your kids' cereal. And we have to resist it in this sort of conspiracy theorist mindset, like very much us versus them. And that's extremely effective rhetoric, especially in a moment of low trust.
Yeah.
It's great rhetoric.
Yeah. I mean, these institutions, which these same people defended to the teeth until they had completely run out of credibility, are now going to switch to all these institutions were always your enemy.
And it's strategic to have that kind of rhetoric right now. It's effective. It creates interesting bedfellows where you have people who are like, I don't want my kids eating red food dye because of these research, in the same bed with people who are like, I don't believe in vaccines, in the same bed as for people who are like, I'd like to be able to pursue a home birth. And it means that there's not like consistency in understanding what's truly evidence-based, but it's identifying real problems. There are real problems. Like this is not a system that's based on increasing health outcomes. This is a system that's based on increasing profit, and therefore it makes lots of bad decisions.
Yeah.
All of that rhetoric is not all of it. I don't think we should be anti-vaccine, although we can have a conversation about the political economy of how vaccines are produced, but like it should be reasonable to have that conversation.
Right. Unfortunately, it's impossible to have a reasonable.
It's impossible to have a reasonable conversation with vaccines. So just like, oh, get vaccinated. So the rhetoric's brilliant, and I don't disagree with the rhetoric, but it's very notable that the only solutions that they are rolling out are individual based or extremely marginal, and it's because Ezra, RFK Jr. is not actually going to like stick it to McDonald's. Or even if McDonald's wasn't, maybe they let McDonald's get away with it because Trump loves it. He's not going to stick it to Coca-Cola. But like, there's no interest. It's not just that the corporations run the show. There's no interest in actually doing anything with this rhetoric. They want to tell Americans, yes, you're upset that your kids are eating red dye, and you've been duped, and you should put the tinfoil hat on, and you should resist, and you should be mad at your neighbor who is vaccinating their kids. Oh, and why don't you try, why don't we get rid of like that one dye that's in Fruit Loops and do nothing else, take everyone off SNAP benefits and offer you a heart rate monitor. Like those are exactly the solutions that they want to offer you, because what they're really telling you is to like consume.
Yeah. Principally, all of these things are going to be market-based solutions that individual consumers
find things that you can have divisions with the people you should have solidarity with.
Yes, that's the other thing.
Like
It's a cultural dress.
Or home birth.
Yeah, a lifestyleism thing.
Lifestyleism. Like, which things do you buy at Costco? Oh, I only buy these 10 products at Costco because my Instagram person who's a Maha lady says these are the ones that are real food ingredients. You buy that at Costco. I can't have my kid go over there.
Yeah.
And like, that is what they're feeding.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a little upsetting to hear Ezra be like confused about what's going on. And this woman who's clearly a well-educated public health journalist be like, not able to identify. She's tiptoeing around the edges that these are not systemic interventions for clearly systemic problems. But I guess maybe she signed something with Ezra that she wouldn't condemn capitalism. I don't know.
I don't think these people have an imagination for a food production system that exists outside of capitalism, food production and distribution system that exists outside capitalism. So they're trying to figure out how to tweak a system, and I think it's impossible. And I think
I have a really good icebreaker prompt for that. If you want to do like a radical imagination exercise, it's not that hard.
These people are not paid for the radical imagination.
No, Ezra Klein is not paid for his radical imagination.
Yeah. But I actually think that RFK is a perfect example of this, because I suspect that there's authentic interest in making the population healthier. And I think there's probably somewhere along the line was an authentic interest in taking it to like exploiters and not simply having a message for the exploited. But all the incentives are wrong. All the incentives are going to be, we're going to make you very wealthy. We're going to make the people around you very wealthy. You're still going to be able to say these important things, and you're going to empower the individual. And you sort of say, well, that's so much easier than having this structural battle with these people who have all this wealth and structure and systematic power, that I'll speak the truth about why these things are bad, and then people will be responsible, right? And what you've not changed anything about the situation they're in, but except for, I guess, information is not valueless, but
his information is mostly misinformation. So
or what is not misinformation is so mixed in with the misinformation that it's hard to tell what's what.
Like the bizarre propaganda videos of him working on his genes.
Yeah, that's very fucking strange, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I actually do think RFK in his like scrambled egg brain does have some things he cares about here. So as I perspective take on this, I'm like, oh, maybe he's a little sad it's going so poorly. But I think anyone who's signing up to be a cabinet person in Trump's White House, but a political appointment in either the Democrats or the Republican side, understand that they're not going to discipline Coca-Cola. Like, that's not the job.
Bert thought he was going to.
First of all, did he really, or was it just a play? And he might be. I mean, mayors of New York are self-deluded. That's a known fact. It's a particular type
who believe that I mean, there are people who have pushed class action lawsuits.
Well, I mean,
on this, right?
It's a good point because she harkens back to Upton Sinclair and other previous eras that this did happen. So maybe I share Ezra's cynicism where I'm like, this ain't the era for that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think there's two ways to read the Upton Sinclair chapter. One is
the chapter of art
history.
I didn't do the Upton Sinclair reading.
You didn't do the reading for the podcast. And one is that he sparked a mass hysteria, which the establishment had to respond to.
He was a muckraker after all.
Yeah.
I did do the read. I did read that part of the textbook.
He was so good at raking muck that they had no choice but to tell him about it because it was so horrifying and offensive. And there is an important part of that story too, which is that he wanted to have a conversation about the workers in the industry, and the thing that people took away from it was what are you feeding me?
Yeah,
right.
And I think that's a really important.
But the other way to read
there was no solidarity built in that movement.
No. One other way to read it though is that we are on the cusp of becoming a capitalist juggernaut. We cannot have a working class, which is sickly all the time.
So then why is it just why are the efforts of RFK, if we're saying let's take it on face value, he's a true believer, maybe Trump's a true believer, the GLP-1 plan's going very well, we have 1 in 8 adults.
Mm-hmm.
That will be higher in a year. That will be double in a year.
Yeah.
So they're eating less, they may be fitter, they're thinner. Great for the airliners. But they are like the MAHA initiatives are failing. They're toothless. They're doing nothing.
Yeah. A lot of it has to do with the fact that we are in a moment now. Neoliberalism created a situation where the individual interests of individual capitalists was primary to the class as a whole. And as the system starts to fall apart, that's becoming it's going to become more and more of a problem that has to be resolved.
You know what? It's a good solution for that.
Fascism. Right. So you have companies like Coca-Cola that's like, I don't care that we're poisoning everybody. We're making so much money. Our stockholders are so happy. And at some point, like FDR had the ability to institute this stuff, not because he was the New Deal I'm talking about.
I was going to say that wasn't the Sinclair.
Yeah.
He did not institute don't put the calf's brain in the milk.
Yeah. What FDR did, the New Deal was instituted in a situation where it wasn't like his force of will. It was partially because there was such a threat to the system by labor organizing that they were desperate to respond. Mm-hmm. It was also because the system had reached a point where it needed to create a new type of state to guide like its growth. Like it had hit the upper limit of what it could achieve without inventing a new type of state and instituting it. And the situation was so dire, both the Great Depression and then World War II, that they were able to discipline people to accept what was not in their individual best interest, was in their best interest as a class. And we haven't hit that crisis in the United States yet, but we will. And a lot of these companies will, I don't know if it'll be health specifically, but generally speaking, it will be the case that these companies will need to be brought to heel because they'll say, like, you can make profit, but you can't make profit at the expense of the entire system. You have to find your place within that system and allow us to have much more firm hand in guiding, like, antitrust law and, like, healthcare and education and, these kinds of things.
Yes. And when you describe it that way, and we look at, RFK, I feel like maybe this administration is not the best administrators of fascism.
They're not.
So that's a booyah for us.
That's correct.
Great. I feel so we have a horrifying, ineffectual administration, mostly, and a toxic food environment, and a toxin-based brain trickery pill that all of the adults are going to go on.
Yeah.
But we might not fully walk into fascism.
We are going to fully walk into fascism. These people are incompetents and idiots. And the parts of fascism they're going to be able to institute are the things that get the population all riled up, like they're going after immigrants. What they won't be able to do is guide these huge structures towards a point where they're ready for, like, war with China, for example, in a real way, which is why the, like, more technocratically competent people who pose as liberals or maybe even conservatives who are more, like, principled and like effective administrators are more dangerous. But Trump's historical role seems to be create the ideological space required by other people to come in later and take advantage of that ideological space to really do the implementation correctly.
Well, I think the ideological space that Ozempic and Maher have created will be a big open space for a very effective Gavin Newsom to fill.
Yeah, that's who I'm thinking about too.
He's the perfect guy for Gavin Newsom to be like, we want you to be fit, we want you to be thin, we don't want any of that food dye in there. Let's go to war with China.
Yeah, in fact, you owe it to the nation. In fact, this is a national project.
Well, and his propaganda will look so much better compared to Hegseth's that you'll be like, thank God.
Right.
Sigh of relief.
Right. A lot of people will be relieved, but what they will not, he's, I think, among the most dangerous of these people because he will be able to pull off the implementation of fascism with a lot of support from liberals who are just so like aesthetically disgusted by Trumpism that they will drink that sand.
Teddy Roosevelt was the president when Upton Sinclair wrote his piece and the FDA was formed.
Teddy Roosevelt also presided over like a lot of the antitrust stuff I was talking about before, and that was also a moment where there was a lot more ability for the state to discipline capital, not for the sake of working people, but for the sake of the capitalist class as a whole.
Done and dusted?
Done and dusted.
Your powers will fade as you grow old. Your powers will fade as you grow old. You're on the make, and you don't do regret. You're always out for what you can get. You think like a snake, and you ooze like a snail. Let the trail go cold as you swallow your tail. With your low rent skills and your heart of flint, telling your tales that are unfit to print. You're all weasel words, backed up by the boots, obsessed like the rest, with a promise of loot. Your pies will fade as you grow old. Your pies will fade as you grow old. Your pies will fade as you grow old. Your pies will fade as you grow old.
I love you.